Wondery Plus subscribers can listen to episodes of How Do You Cope early and ad-free. Join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app or on Apple Podcasts. Hello and welcome to How Do You Cope with me, John Robbins. This is the show where I sit down with special guests to talk about the challenges they've overcome and the coping mechanisms they use in their everyday lives. Today's guest is the fitness coach, cookbook writer and social media personality Joe Wicks. Joe shot to fame during the coronavirus pandemic when he launched his PE with Joe live streams. On the day that national lockdowns were announced in the UK, Joe started streaming the daily workouts which aimed to keep children and their families fit and healthy during a tumultuous time. The first streams watched by over 900,000 people and the numbers kept climbing from there. Prior to this, Joe had been working as a fitness instructor, which he began doing after first working as a teaching assistant. He launched his YouTube channel, The Body Coach TV, in 2014 and gradually became an online success. Alongside his high-intensity interval training videos, Joe was making cooking videos and in 2015 launched his first cookbook, Lean in 15, and he's since released a whole range of successful cookbooks. Joe was awarded an MBE in 2020 for his attempts to keep the nation fit and moving during the pandemic. A documentary about Joe aired on the BBC in 2022. Called Joe Wicks, Facing My Childhood, it told the story of Joe's relationships with his parents, his father's battles with addiction, and his mother's OCD. In our conversation, we spoke about how Joe used exercise from a young age to cope with his difficult experiences at home, how lockdown changed his career, and also the relationships between children and parents who have addiction problems or mental health issues, and how we can best relate to our parents as we grow older and understand more about what was going on as children. In our discussion, we do mention a few organisations which might be useful to explain here. Joe talks about his dad's experience with NA, that's Narcotics Anonymous, and I mention ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. We also mention Al-Anon, which is a 12-step support program for people with alcoholism in their lives, and also the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, which is a charity set up to provide information and support for anyone affected by their parents' drinking. And you can contact any of those organisations for free if you would like advice about how to cope with someone's addiction. Welcome, Joe Wicks. Thank you so much for coming in today to speak to me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate.
Maybe we could start with a scenario that I think a lot of people will identify with. We're going to talk a lot about fitness as a coping mechanism, the impact it has on your mental health, on your physical health, and the part you've played in sort of spreading that message to people. So yesterday, I'm at home. I do CrossFit. I've just started running a bit. It plays a part in my sobriety and in my mental health. So I'm on board, like I get it.
Brilliant. Love that. That's good. That's positive.
And I'm in my house and I'm feeling like crap and I'm feeling low, like I just want to stay in bed all day. I'm snacking a lot, like going to the kitchen back and forth just for something to do. And it gets to about 4:00. I think, you haven't left the house today. Just run. Just go and run. It doesn't matter how far you go, just do it.
Let's get going, yeah.
So I get my shorts on, I get my watch on, I get my trainers on. And I go for a run and I hated every second of it. Like I absolutely hated it.
You sound like me because I'm training for a marathon at the moment. I'm also going through that where I'm just like not enjoying it at all. I don't really get much joy from it. But did you finish the run? How did you get on? Did you do it?
Yeah, I did. But I hated feeling unfit when I'm doing something that's meant to make me feel fitter is when I feel my least fit. I got this voice in my head going, you can't do this. You're no good at this. You should stop. Why have you even bothered? Why didn't you start doing this 20 years ago? I feel like I can't breathe. I feel bored. I feel like sluggish. And the only reason I continued is to be able to say to myself, you did it. And I got home and I'm just like, I didn't enjoy any of that. So, but I know it's good. And I probably feel better this morning as a result of doing that. And today will be a better day than yesterday as a result of doing that. But what do you say to that person? Because I think a lot of people see fitness stuff and they think, how do these people enjoy it so much?
Well, what I've noticed myself is that recently there's become such an emphasis on performance and numbers. Everyone's posting these crazy like Strava times and crazy personal bests. And so it's this element of competition, like maybe not with yourself, but with people around you or, your Instagram followers. And I've really stepped back from that, and I'm trying to enjoy the plod, the slow plod. Because what I've realized is I actually don't mind running slow, but the minute you start trying to run a 4-minute kilometer and you're trying to run PBs, it's like it takes all the joy out of it for me. I don't really love the running. Obviously, I've signed up to this marathon. I've kind of got to do it. I've got to build the miles up. But, I just think you shouldn't force yourself into an exercise you really, really dislike. I mean, if you get zero joy from it, can you get into cycling or, like you said, CrossFit or, doing a home workout? I do think it's about trying different things until something kind of clicks and you go, you know what? I don't love it when I'm doing it potentially, but at the end of it, I get that, the post-workout sort of endorphins, which we know now has a huge impact on the brain, the chemicals in the brain. And so, it's almost, I say to people, exercise isn't optional, it's essential for good physical, mental health, So don't worry about the running. You're not going to love everything you do, but it's okay to, chuck it in once now and again, but don't be hard on yourself if you're slow or you walk. People have this issue with walking. Sometimes I'll walk for a minute, run for 2 minutes, I'm still out and about, I'm getting some fresh air and it has an impact. But yeah, remove that kind of limit from your head that you've got to be super fit to enjoy it. You can just take it easy and have a little cruise.
I really agree with what you're saying there about sort of fitness influencing. And something I've discussed before in this podcast is optimization fatigue.
Right.
Like this idea that so much of what we consume about fitness and well-being is almost like treating the audience as if they're professional athletes. And people compare themselves to say like a fitness influencer on Instagram, and this person's talking about their daily routine and they're looking amazing. And there's all these photos of them looking amazing. And people can never attain that because they don't go to a gym 6 hours a day. Whereas if you're a fitness influencer, you're going to be spending the most of your day sort of doing some form of fitness or in that world.
Yeah, of course. It's easy.
Whereas if you're working like 9 to 5, leave the house at 8, get back at 6, it's just no point comparing those two worlds, is there?
It's two different realities. Yeah, I mean, I've just finished a really awesome tour. I did a UK workplace tour. So I visited 10 companies. I really got a sense of like, it's so difficult for so many people to find time to exercise. Some people are working 12-hour shifts. They've got 2 jobs. They've got kids, single parents, low-income families. And so I'm always trying to really tap into that. It's one of the reasons I do the tours, right? Because I really get a sense of like what are the barriers that people face. And it's just a case of trying to, find time. It could be 20 minutes a day. I really believe that even like a short home workout sometimes is enough to like, just to reduce the stress from the body, clear some of that resentment or anger that's going through you. And you don't need to have the perfect hour a day in the gym, to feel fit and to get progress. And so it is something that people struggle with. But, there is always someone in the same job finding the time to exercise, and the people that are, what I found is that people are finding that time to exercise and cook on a weekend and make food for themselves. Their mental health is, phenomenally better and they're in much better space physically because they're just carving out that time and finding that time to exercise, and it's transformative really for their life. And
do you think that that's part of what made your content click with people during lockdown? Is a sense that we're all on the same level. We're all in our living rooms or we're in our garden. No one's got access to anything that anyone else doesn't have. So watching a Joe Wicks video at the start of lockdown, you didn't feel unobtainable. You didn't feel like I'm going to have to spend the next 10 years of my life to be like this guy. It was like he's with me in a space like I'm in. I had no idea what I was doing, no clue really in terms of who's going to tune in, how long it was going to go on for. But what I loved was that I just made it accessible, for the first time. Maybe, I don't know if you do have kids, but, parents and children for the first time ever were exercising in front of each other and with their grandparents on Zoom and FaceTime and stuff. And so, yeah, I made it just like really kind of fun and just playful. And I think that was one of the reasons people connected with me. And even now, if I do anything, a tour, I'm walking down the street, someone on social media, they're always thanking me for PB Joe in lockdown because it really helped, get them through a difficult time, I think. In your documentary, you mentioned running to school. You didn't need to run to school. You could have got the bus or you could have walked, but you just ran because the physical pain and suffering you felt from running, you describe as being helpful in just like a release from pain and difficulty at home. Could you talk listeners through what your home life was like as a kid? Yeah, there were days I got the bus, but some days I would just like, in my blazer, big baggy blazer, maybe some trainers or school shoes and a rucksack and just run along. I remember just thinking everything was bouncing. It was an awkward thing, but
there was something about physical exercise and I suppose pushing myself physically meant that I didn't need to talk about what was going on at home. And because I couldn't, essentially, like, there was this fear around, could I talk about my mum and dad addiction and mental health issues, because I thought I'd, be taken away. Back then, these things weren't spoken about. This is 1990 probably, and there wasn't much sort of safeguarding and just teachers asking you questions. You just labelled a naughty kid who can't sit still and really distracted. But actually, if someone sat me down and said, what's going on at home? And maybe I would have opened up. But yeah, my dad suffered with, addiction from a young age. Started out like sniffing glue and drinking and smoking weed, and it eventually went pretty quickly onto harder drugs. So he was a heroin addict, and always has and always will be an addict. And I've learned to navigate through that. And then my mum had severe OCD, so really intense cleaning of the house 3 times a day, like proper like spring cleaning. Like, so being a kid in this environment where I had to like take my shoes off, couldn't make noise, had to make my bed and iron my clothes, and hoover at 4 or 5 years old. It was quite an intense environment, and obviously that was a lot of friction. And then when my dad was there, he wasn't really present. If he was out of it. And then when he was using, he was kicked out, and he'd be in a squat or in a rehab or whatever. So I had lots of love, and I felt love, and I kind of felt safe in that respect, but just instability of like, what's happening next? Is my dad going to get kicked out? And so, yeah, always probably quite anxious. And I think because of that, definitely, acted up at school. I was a nice kid, but I was annoying, and I was a class clown and an attention seeker, and, I just wanted someone to talk to me and sort of probably ask me like, what's up? But yeah, that was my past and my experience, and it was chaotic. But at the same time, I felt loved. My mum and dad always said, we're sorry that we're going through this, but we love you. And I think that is the key factor in driving me forward as a human being, and kept me kind of safe and happy and kind of kept my feet on the ground, was that I just knew that instinctively, although they were going through their own chaos, they still loved me unconditionally.
So was there some kind of conversation between your parents and you at that young age about what was happening? Because I think a lot of children of addicts or parents with mental health problems or mental illness, they only start to put the pieces together when they're older.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So what was your sort of awareness of what was going on as a kid?
So I've got an older brother who's 18 months older than me, so he remembers a lot more. He was much more introvert. He bottled it all up. I was loud and shouty, and I was, I'd fight back, and I'd be definitely more kind of verbal. But I think he probably picked up on things a lot earlier than me. He was a little bit older than me. I do remember things like, my mum would say, Daddy's gone away to hospital because he's taking tablets for his back pain, and he's addicted to them, sort of that thing. So it wasn't like he's addicted to heroin, but, with that kind of drug, I don't remember it being around me as such, but I remember the smells of like my dad coming home and say he'd used, smelling the smell of maybe it was just cigarettes and weed, but also just knowing, I just knew in my heart he had used, and so the biggest fear, and the thing that will probably upset me the most, is when I think about, he used to say like, I'm just popping around the shop to like grab some milk, or I'm popping around the shop to get a paper, and he'd be gone for days, you know what I mean? So that thing of not knowing when he was going to come back probably made me anxious and a bit like, a bit kind of on edge sort of thing. But yeah, it's a destructive drug, heroin's, because my dad, even now, will really struggle, to be honest. He'll lie until he's caught with a needle in his arm. Do you know what I mean? He'll tell you half the story. I've just been using for a few days. I just relapsed last week. Do you know what I mean? You never really get the truth. And that's hard, because every time you feel like you're building a relationship with someone, you feel like there's no real trust. And that's a big challenge. But as the years have gone on, and I understand therapy, and I understand the antidote to addiction is connection. So when I feel angry, when I push my dad away and just say, fucking get away from me, I can't be with you, I actually ring him up and say, do you want to hang out? Come see the kids. Let's go out for the day. Let's go out on the motorbikes. And it makes a difference, you know what I mean? As opposed to pushing him away and letting him isolate even more. Because when you isolate, the shame and the guilt, and it's just like a spiral. To answer the question, so I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but I was probably like, 6, 7, 8 years old, started to realise something was going on. And then obviously a bit older, like 9, 10, 11, realising he was going to rehab, and he would come back and then he'd relapse. And then I got angry as a teenager. That's when the anger came out for me, because I was just fed up with it by then.
That really resonates, that phrase, connection is the opposite of addiction. And I was once speaking to a psychiatric nurse, and we were talking about medication in general. And she said, there is no medicine I can prescribe anyone that is proved to be more effective than exercise, community, and meditation.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that's like, I can't guarantee any pill will do more to help you than those three things. And I think the community side of it is really important, and also something that a lot of people don't feel they have. And I wondered if, what part of your fitness content is as much about getting people together or to feel part of something, even if it's on a stream, as opposed to just moving and getting out of breath and getting your heart rate and endorphins and all that sort of stuff as well. Do you really push the community side of things?
It's really interesting you said that, because I also watched that documentary on Netflix called Stutz about that psychologist. And in the first opening minute, he asked the question, what is the most powerful thing for shifting someone's mental health? And he said the same. And I actually got really emotional, because it's like, if only people heard that message, you haven't got to sit with a psychiatrist on $2,000 an hour to be told actually exercise is the answer. And so I found it quite powerful, moving, that even he as a doctor was saying the same thing, that when he got a patient or a client moving and exercising, it just completely lifted the fog just for a moment. Yeah, really interesting you said that. And I agree. I think it's the most powerful thing, but also the hardest thing, to get people doing when they're in that low state. But yeah, I'm so proud of what I've achieved in terms of, getting people moving, but also, the community I've built. Like, I do these runs. So I did a UK tour, and every now and again I say, like, I'm going to be in Edinburgh, I'm going to be at this little point at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Do you want to come for a run? And I know at least 20 to 100 or sometimes 1,000 people will be there to run with me. And it's such a lovely thing, because I've built a community where people actually, of all shapes and sizes, different age groups, different fitness level, will turn up. Sometimes they've got their dog or their kids, in their strollers. And although it's very digital what I've done with social media and the app and obviously the fitness business, actually what I do love more than anything is live events and bring them all together. Because when you do that, it's lifting their mood. It's like, because we feel very connected because we're on WhatsApp threads and we're chatting to our friends, and we might send a voice note to our mum, but we're not connected like we used to be. We're not calling as much, and we're not having that face-to-face interaction. And I think, when I look at my dad and my mum, like, most of their, I would say, depression and loneliness and addiction comes from being alone and being on their own. They're much happier than they're with me and the kids and we're having a day out. It's when they're on their own and are isolating and, left to their own devices. And I think humans need to be with other people. We really do. Whether it's your family or friends, it's trying to tap into that and not get sucked into the screen-based friendships that we all live now,
We're often told we're anxious because of social media, and we're anxious because we spend too much time online. And there is definite truth in that. But you're an example of how social media and the internet can be an enormous power for bringing people together. We're told phones equals bad. If you're on your phone, you're doing yourself damage. But even if I'm watching a video of you in your living room doing burpees or whatever, I'm like connected to something, and I can see that there's 900,000 people, 2 million people watching it. So you do feel, especially in lockdown where everyone was isolated, it was a way of feeling a part of something. Like, we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves for living digitally in some ways. Yeah,
look, if it wasn't for YouTube and it wasn't for, like Instagram and Facebook and all the newsletters and tweets, because I shared it on my channels, obviously, announced it. And then by the Monday, every school knew, every news channel, they were like, oh, Joe's doing PE. He's your guy, we trust him. And it took a long time. I think people think I just blew up in that moment, but I'd built like 7 or 8 years of trust, and I'd done a lot of school visits, and I tested the concept of PE with Joe in schools hundreds of times. So I knew people were going to enjoy it, and I made it fun, obviously, with the Wheel of Fortune and the spot the different side things behind me and the quizzes and things. But I was around at a time when social media and technology came along, and I've used it in such a positive way. And besides the exercise, I've also got millions of people cooking, I've done the cookbooks and stuff. And so, I'm blessed that Instagram was there and I could share my funny videos and my silly Lean and 15 stuff. But there is that side of it which is negative, because it is a very addictive. I mean, I'm having a bit of a moment of awakening at the moment around sugar and social media. I'm so addicted to it. And so I've never thought of myself as an addict, but I really find it hard to put my phone down. I doom scroll. I consume a lot of sugar, I stress eat, I binge on it, and you can't see it on me physically, right? Because I'm fit, because I train so much. But, if I wasn't active, I think I would struggle, because it's a substance that when it hits my brain in any form, I just want more and more and more. And so I'm really looking at them things now, thinking, how can I reduce sugar in my life? How can I reduce the screen time? And so I deleted Twitter the other day. I'm so fed up. It's become the really horrible place. I deleted Twitter. I'm now removing certain apps on my phone and just having a few moments in the day where I turn it off completely, like when I'm doing the bedtime with the kids, so say 6 to 8 p.m, because I found myself just grabbing it, just not enjoying the story because I'm rushing back to my phone. I'm like, why am I rushing back to my phone? And it's because my brain just wants the dopamine. My brain wants Instagram Reels. It wants it as soon as I wake up. And so it's the hardest thing. And I'm listening to an audiobook at the moment, which I really recommend, called How to Break Up With Your Phone, because we've got no boundaries with it, have we? Because in the same breath that I've managed to reach millions and sell millions of books and have this amazing career, I've also, in other ways, like been sucked in as a consumer, and I am addicted to social media. Do you find that hard as well?
Well, I deleted Twitter last week.
Really? I did it the same. Yeah, I got fed up with it.
It's hard because part of me is telling myself, as someone who relies on social media to share things like this podcast, for example, you know, Wondery, who make this podcast, know I've got X number of Twitter followers, and they're like, well, that's really good because they're 80,000 people or whatever we can tell about this podcast. And I tell myself that I need it. I was all worried about it, and then I just deleted it, and I haven't thought about it again since.
It's amazing.
And
you
it's
know
had
what?
no impact on my life.
But yeah, Twitter just wasn't a positive place. Like, I was like watching videos and this crazy CCTV stuff in South America and all the hate stuff, and it's making you angry. And I was like, what? And I was thinking, why am I on here? And I thought, for the business, yeah, it's nice to post a few blogs now and again, and it drives a bit of traffic to your website, and you might get a few book sales. But I as a human being, I just can't be on. I can't consume that, because it was sucking me in to the point that, you know, rather than listen to a podcast or watch a show on Netflix or whatever, I'm doing an hour of like Twitter, an hour of Twitter Reels, and then an hour of Twitter Shorts. And yeah, that's gone. And there's a little blank spot on my phone where on the homepage where I keep sort of going to tap it. It's weird for the first few days, but there are ways of unplugging. I think the key to it is really having like real boundaries. Like, don't have it in the bedroom, have an alarm clock, you know, don't have it when you first wake up, have half an hour if you can. And it's hard. It's an actual challenge for me, because I don't want to go upstairs to my gym and have no music and no podcasts. And so it's like, well, I need it. But I'm like, well, if I have it, the second I've got it, I'm looking at Instagram and Twitter. So I'm trying to just go back to our basics, get an old digital radio or something, and just tune out for a few hours, because it's so consuming.
Yeah, I've definitely found that helpful, is to like separate out the functions that your phone has so that you don't need it in every room you're in. And often that's not as expensive as it sounds. You know, like you said, you can get a really cheap DAB radio now. You can get a super cheap alarm clock. I mean, like $4.99.
Yeah.
So that you don't think, oh, well, I would turn my phone off if I hadn't set this alarm, or if I wasn't listening to music through my speaker on it or whatever.
It's just got everything in one, hasn't it? Yeah, it's all in one. Look, you can make some positive changes there, but I think it'll have a huge impact on your sleep, more of an impact on your mental health than you might think. And so, yeah, it's definitely something we all need to take a look at, I think, a little bit.
So there are an awful lot of charities around and organisations to help children of addicts. I'm going to get some of these initialisms wrong, but there's like ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. There's NACOA, I think, is another one. And there is more awareness now of the impact that growing up with addiction in the household has on kids. And often children develop coping mechanisms that they don't even understand. These aren't conscious things, but they might disassociate, or they might seek out addictive substances themselves, or they may become people pleasers because they feel a big pressure to make everyone feel okay. And those coping mechanisms that we develop as kids can then become destructive behaviors when we're adults. And you were saying, you know, you were labeled like naughty or a class clown or attention seeking, but also conceding that was a reaction to what was going on at home. And I wondered, apart from exercise, which, like, thank God that was the thing you found, what a great coping mechanism as a kid to get that. Have you noticed stuff in later life that has been less helpful to you and you've had to address, that stems back to how you got through as a kid?
I think for me, exercise was always the main sort of like channel for me, because, you know, and I did tap into some of those sort of child therapy sessions as a young teenager, because I think I was angry at that point. So again, I never felt I had an issue like talking, because I would verbalise and vocalise how I felt, and I'd scream and shout at my dad and say, I don't want to see you until you're clean, and all that kind of, you know, like conditional stuff. But it doesn't really work when you're an addict. Like, they've got to want to get clean themselves. And even as an adult, you know, I haven't done much therapy. I'm quite open. Like, I'm sensitive. I'm an emotional person. I'm very sensitive, and I'm an empath. So I think I was a bit of a young carer, not a physical carer in terms of someone with disability, but emotionally, like worrying about my mum, was she eating enough? Because she had, anxiety and eating disorder. She was like bulimic and stuff and anorexic. So thinking like, is she eating? Because she just lived off, chocolate, cigarettes and cans of Coke. And I kind of observed that. And then obviously my dad was worried about him getting caught using, or was he clean? And so I don't know. My biggest downfall is probably definitely emotionally in terms of relationships, maybe like, feeling quite needy, like, want to be loved, want to feel like I'm really close to my friend. I'm having a bit of a moment where I feel quite distant from people, not out of choice, because we've all got kids and jobs and everyone's stressed. And so we used to go for dinners like once a month. We'd have a night out once a month, and now it's becoming once every 5 months or 6 months. We used to do boys' ski trips and trips to Vegas and little trips to Ibiza, but they're coming few and far between. Not because we can't, because, kids come first. We've got between my mates and me, we've got like 30 kids. Imagine. I've got 4.
How many mates?
I've got for like 10 mates probably.
Yeah.
I've got 4. My mate's got 4. My other mate's got 3. My brother's got 2. Although I know they're there on WhatsApp and I can pick up a phone and they're there, like my boys are there and I love them and they'll be there, but I just feel like quite disconnected. So I struggle with that, because I want to feel like we're all close. We're all really like, in touch, and same my family and friends. I'm definitely the glue in the family that will kind of say, come on, like, come to mine for Christmas dinner, or we got to do something, let's get together. And I just think it's not out of choice. It's people just find it really hard to find time, and your kids and wife come first, and then your brother and cousins and all the friends sort of come secondary. But yeah, I definitely think there's an element where, like, being probably abandoned and not like stable, that's made me like a bit needy.
Watching the documentary, I know it was a couple of years ago, it's a hard watch in places, because you're having quite intense conversations, sometimes for the first time, with people very close to you. But the bit I found hardest to see was you replying to every single DM you got on Instagram, on social media, with a video of people you've never met telling you very intense stories about their own mental illness, their mental health, their lives, and you feeling a responsibility to actually reply individually to every single person. And we're talking like a message a minute. And I wondered if that part of you that feels responsible for keeping everyone safe, do you relate that back to your time worrying about your mum and your dad and not knowing if they were going to be okay?
Yeah, I think looking back, that was a really intense period, because I was filming the documentary, but in the process I was sort of putting out more content around mental health and sharing my journey. And so the more I put out in the world, the more would come back, And so some people could just like look at that message and quickly skim it and read it and just put it down and sort of. But if I read a message and I open, they've seen I've opened it, a part of me is like, I cannot ignore that. But it's like you walking past me on the street crying, asking for a hug, and I just go, I can't do that right now. Do you know what I mean? So it's a real person, although it's a text. It's not necessarily a voice note or a video, it's a text. And I'm like, I've got to reply to that person. So I would usually flag those until I was in the right headspace and just maybe send a voice note. It wasn't always a video. And it was really intense. I was doing 9-10 hours a day screen time, and it was really full on. But now things have slowed down a bit. I'm not putting as much out in that sense. And also I'm having better boundaries of it. I'm not taking it to the bedroom. I'm not on it 24/7 like I was. But that was just a moment in time where I just felt like I wanted to do more. And now I've come to terms of actually, you might only send 10 or 20 messages today to strangers that you never met, but that's enough, and that's kind, that's enough kindness for the day. You don't have to do 100, and there were days I did 100, but by the end of it, I've got nothing for my kids, nothing to say to Rosie. I'm just like, because some of it's really lovely, like, Joe, I just want to say, love your videos, and you got me and my child through, lockdown. You're amazing, and it's like a lovely feeling of love, a gratitude. And then the second one is like, I've got depression, I'm suicidal, and I've opened the text, and I can't ignore that. Do you know what I mean? And so, I'm not a trained psychologist either, bearing in mind, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I would just try and send something kind, just let them know I'm listening. And, I often would see people come back a week later and go, oh, thank you, Joe, I did a workout last night and I feel great. Do you know what I mean? So it's little things, I'll just nudge them and ask them the right sort of question. But again, I'm in uncharted territory, I don't know really what I'm doing. And so I try and direct them to someone and say, let's speak to your family. But some people are going to me, I just can't talk to my family. And I'm thinking, why do you feel like you can send a message? I'm a stranger on Instagram. Why are you sending me a text of all the people in your life? They said, I feel like you would listen to me. And even if you don't reply to me, I just want to say it to you and get it off my chest. Is that a gift or a curse? I don't know. I think it's a kind thing and it's a nice thing to do, but it's unsustainable to do it all day, every day. like I will burn out and I will end up, running out of energy for it, and obviously having my own sort of struggles with my own mental health potentially.
It's really important as someone whose job is public facing, who is, trying to help as many people as possible in as many mediums as possible, to like set boundaries for your own self to protect your time with your kids, your time with your wife. There's a couple of points in the documentary where it's like every time the camera is on your wife, she's saying, yeah, I hope he stops doing all this DM stuff pretty soon, so I'm a little bit worried about him. So was that a conversation you had with your wife?
Mainly just there on camera. Like, that's the thing. Like, I was having conversations with my mum about things, like, my dad, but no, Rosie didn't. She's quite shy. Like, although I live in the media, like, she doesn't really want to be on social media. She's quite private, she doesn't share on social media. So it was a big thing for her to even come on camera. But I think they just asked her the question, like, do you worry about him? And she says, yeah, I do worry about him, because it is a lot. Because I say, look at this, and I'll show her a message sometimes. She's, oh, that's pretty full. I don't know how you reply to these. But again, I'm not doing that all day, every day. And I still think it's a really wonderful thing to be able to reach out to someone and just make a complete stranger somewhere on the other side of the world feel good, or do a workout, or cook a healthy meal. Like, my life's quite similar in that sense. Like, what am I doing with my time? It's like, because I have those moments where I lay in bed and I'm like, I zoom out and think, I'm on this planet and it's spinning around, and I'm like, when's the end of the universe? Why are we all here? What's the point? And you start to I get stressed by that thought of not knowing the answer. But then I just come back to the fact that, I'm here and I'm doing good things. I'm not selling a lie. I'm selling a lifestyle that actually, like, if you just listen to me for 1 second and you do one of these things this week, whether it's go to bed a bit earlier, or, do a workout, or cook one healthy breakfast, you're going to have a better life. And so it really keeps my North Star, my vision of what I do, and my kind of purpose quite clear and simple. Do you know what I mean? So look, I could offload my social media to someone else, right? Here's a community manager. But if I did that, I think I'd lose motivation and I'd lose focus pretty quickly, because it would just be YouTube subscribers, revenue, book sales, numbers, right? If the human element was gone, what would it be? It's just more money in the bank, more numbers, more, do you know what I mean? More pre-orders of a book. I need to do the runs. I need to do the events. I need to visit schools. I really need it. It's a part of I suppose it's part of the energy that keeps me going. And my brother Nicky as well, he comes on all the tours, because he's the same. He's a CEO of the company. He's like, I want to be there. I want to feel the human part of our business. So it's not all digital, if you know what I mean.
I want to talk a little bit about learning boundaries when you have an addict in your life, because there's a really good piece of advice that they give in Al-Anon. So Al-Anon is a 12-step group for people who have an alcoholic in their lives. But it can be quite hard to hear, and they call them the 3 C's. And the 3 C's are: I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure it.
Okay.
Those are things that every single person who lives with an addict has quite understandably tried to do. They blame themselves for maybe causing elements of it. They've argued or hidden alcohol or shouted to try and get someone to stop, and they've thought, right, this is up to me to sort this out, because they're not capable, because they're in the midst of this. And I wondered how you've perhaps battled with those things over the years, trying to intervene with your dad or feeling responsible for him. Yeah,
it's a good question. It's one that even I think about now. Like, I still feel like I'm my dad's dad. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm his parent in a sense, and not in a negative way, but just because I worry about him. Like, he hasn't got to worry about me. I'm over here with my family, my kids, and good mental health, and I'm strong, and I'm fit, and I'm not ill, and I'm not addicted, and I'm just cruising through life. Whereas he's up and down, depressed. He's relapsing. He's in Costa Rica doing ayahuasca. He's gone through all that. He's gone through, heroin, weed, alcohol, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and he's getting the same result. You know what I mean? He still ends up being in his brain, in his mind. He's a human being with childhood trauma. He's going through step 4 at the moment. He said to me, he's writing it like a bit differently, talking about all these experiences in blocks of 5 years, from like 5 to 10, 10 to 15. And he said, it's really sad. I'm learning about my childhood, and it's like, I went through a lot. I had a lot of abandonment, a lot of all these things. And, I broke the cycle. I'm really glad that I didn't repeat the cycle of addiction. And, it was hard, but I'm much more compassionate now, is what I'm saying, because as a teenager, living in that, resentment and like just angry. I remember being such an angry teenager. But now as an adult, I know the process and I know that addiction is within him. And I can pay for him to go on a retreat to India or go and stay at my house in Santa Monica because it's going to be good for him. He's in the sun, but his loneliness will still follow him and he can still end up smoking weed in Santa Monica because it's like completely, it's not even illegal that there. So, and the same with, going on retreats. Like, I suppose I've tried to facilitate his clean time and tried to help him stay clean. And in the process of him not being clean, like worrying all the time, like, is he going to relapse? Is he depressed? Is he lonely? And yeah, it's hard because I wish he had a partner. I wish he had someone. I wish him and my mum had partners. But again, you can't force someone to have a relationship and you can't force someone to find love. And so I definitely think I carry, my mum and dad in that sense emotionally. And this is something that my brothers also feel. We definitely feel like we got to worry about them and care about them because they're not consistent. They're up and down and always have been and probably always will be. But yeah, I just have more compassion. I don't push him away anymore. I really don't. And if he wants to talk about ayahuasca, I'll listen to him. If he wants to talk about relapse, I'll listen to him. I sort of remove the shame and guilt with it, whereas before he would never talk about using and relapsing and drugs. Now it's like, look, when we talk about it, I'll listen to what you want to say. But he's come to a conclusion that actually, those things, although temporarily lifted his mood a little bit and maybe helped with the depression, it's not long term. You've got to integrate that into your life by living the life, keeping it simple, right? You got to work the steps. Every time my dad relapses because he pulls away from NA. It's as simple as that. It's a reminder that, you can't really go out alone. You end up back on the drink, back on the weed, back on the drugs. And, it's a pull, I think, that he knows now he's got to be a part of that. And it's the fellowship, it's the step, it's the fellowship, it's the community, isn't it? That's really the power, I think, of NA. It's knowing that you're not alone and other people are going through just as much as you and you can talk together about it,
Yeah, and also understanding that addiction is an illness you will always have, and daily action is going to keep you away from that substance or that behaviour. And like you say, as soon as you stop taking that daily action, or twice weekly or whatever, as soon as it stops becoming regular, you sort of isolate, and then your head takes over, and you can't really trust your head.
Yeah, and it's the same with everything. It can be applied to, not just addicts, but people with their diet, with exercise, with sleep. It's just having a plan and a structure and a daily, just a bit of focus that you might not do all of them things, but just one of them is great. And one of them is going to help you, move forward and progress. I mean, look, the Serenity Prayer ticks it off. You talked about that, Al-Anon and some of those 3 C's, but the Serenity Prayer for me as living with someone who's been an addict, it's kind of like, accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Now, I do think about that some because I can't change my dad, but I can, be courageous and be understanding and have some empathy and love him unconditionally, because addicts, they struggle. It's not a choice. It's an addiction, and it's something they need to work on. And so, actually, being loving and being supportive is going to, I think, get you much further than like pushing that person away, because really they just want to be loved and probably held and sort of, supported, as opposed to isolated and pushed away. But then, for years, I mean, you might have an opinion on this in terms of, facilitating, what's the word, when you enable, yeah, like, is that a thing? Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer, because we enabled him a lot. My mum let him come back a lot. There's that thing of enabling versus like actually being compassionate. What is the answer really?
Unless, let's take an alcoholic, for example. Unless you are pouring a drink and pouring it down that person's throat, I don't think it's fair to blame yourself for enabling someone because you were compassionate or accepting or loving. The only person who chooses to use a substance is the person doing it. And we can understand that that's not necessarily a choice. It's not a logical choice they're making. This is a good thing for me. I'm choosing to do this. It's an impulse. But there must have been times, I think it's important for anyone listening who does have an addict in their life, there must have been times where you do draw a boundary and just go, I can't have you around when you're like this. And for example, when someone's using, their life might be chaos. They might be getting into an awful lot of financial trouble. They might be, getting into sort of criminal activity. And it's okay to protect yourself. That's not an unkind thing to do, is it?
Yeah, look, I think I'd find it very, very hard if my dad was using drugs now around my kids. He's involved in our lives. He's round. We spend time together, and he's clean. And I'm really proud of him. He's doing really well. He's really got into the NA at the moment. He's really accepted that. You know what? I need, even if he might find it difficult at times, he needs that structure in his life. But yeah, if we had a conversation in a year's time and my dad's been using heroin for a year, Would I be seeing him? It'd be really hard. It'd be very hard, especially with my kids, because I don't want him to see him in that, in that way. But I think that's one of the motivators for him. I think he wants to be a good granddad, and I think he wants to be present, because he missed out on a lot. It's sad he missed out on a lot of time with me and my brothers, and now he's got a chance to be a good grandfather. And yeah, compassion, I don't know, it's tested in different situations, I suppose, isn't it? But I think there's always different levels of progression through that, isn't there? And progression through your recovery. It's not always perfect. There might be a few steps back, but I think even with the step backs, you still get a bit stronger on the follow up.
And I think also there can often be so much focus on the addict and where they're at, and whether they're using or not, and whether they're stable or not, whether they've got a place to stay or not, that the people around them don't take time to look after themselves. And that's why I think these charities and these organisations, meetings you can actually go to be around other people who have addicts in their lives, are really important to protect your own mental health in that what can be at times quite a chaotic world.
I think looking back as a kid, you sort of think that, or even maybe my parents thought that, well, I'm the addict, I'm the one with the issue, and it just affects me, but it really affects the whole family, doesn't it? Like your nan, your mum, the kids, people you work with, just friends that care about you. There's a lot more people affected by addiction than you think. But yeah, it's often, you don't often sort of stop and take note of how has it affected me, because I'm quite a positive person. Even now, I've not got emotional. I usually get quite emotional talking about this stuff, but I'm kind of in a positive place, and I'm actually just grateful that they're clean, grateful that my mum and dad are still alive, and things that could be so much worse. Yeah, but I definitely didn't at the time think it affected my mental health. I just was I'm just angry, I wasn't mature enough to think, but for sure, it affected my ability to sit still and focus at school, because, I was just thinking like that and worrying, and just my diet was terrible. And so, there's just different things that affect you. And I think the most important thing is you can break the cycle, you can make changes. That's the positive thing from this conversation, is that, you don't have to, just because my granddad was an addict and my dad was an addict, doesn't mean I have to repeat that. There is a way of working through those things and coming out of it a really strong character, really with good mental health.
Let's talk about breaking that cycle, breaking that chain. Are there things you do with your kids consciously or sort of automatically just to sort of protect their mental health and your relationship with them?
I mean, everything, every single day, my whole life. I was just thinking this on the way here, I feel like I'm either working or being a dad. There's nothing in between. This is why I miss the friends at the moment, because there's no curry on a Friday night. It's just work, intense, meeting a lot of people in a short space of time. And then I'm at home with the kids, and, we choose to homeschool because I want to be there for them, and I love teaching them. But it's hard, it's challenging. And so I'm trying to be present, be loyal to them, and be in their life, things that I didn't probably experience, because I really want to be a dad that is present in my kids' lives and be there through the hard times, not just run out and piss off out for a few days when it's hard, get through them difficult times. And, my kids do want to, just like any other kids, sit in front of a TV, right, and be quite sedentary. But I'm like, look, we're going out. We've got to go out for a run. Let's go for a bike ride. We're doing this London marathon together. They're doing the mini marathon. So I said, come on, let's just run around the block. Can we do a kilometre? And they whinged and moaned pretty much the whole way. But by the end of it, we had a little cheer and they were really happy. So I think, you have to be the driving force in your family sometimes, to be the one that gets your kids away from screens, gets the family moving, gets out in the cold when it's a bit grey and a bit windy, because, it lifts everybody's mood, it really does. So I'm definitely the cheerleader in the house. Other than being a fitness coach and being, who I am, I do really love teaching my kids. I'm not a good guitarist, but I'm teaching the guitar, and just sat with my little boy last night and he's finger picking. I'm like, this is amazing. So I get a lot of buzz from that, but it's hard trying to be everything at once, It's hard trying to be a football coach and do music and do the dinner and cook and, be there for Rosie and all those things. And I've got 4 kids too, so you're constantly got one in your arm, one on the floor, you're juggling. But yeah, that's the challenge of having a big family. So, but we did sign up for it. We do want more kids. So we want kids? One more. We're going to stop at 5 is the goal. 5 kids. And I do
5 kids.
Yeah, I do like having. I suppose it's the love. It's the love. It's the unconditional love from other people. It's like we're a family. We're a unit. And I love it. It is chaos, but I do love being a dad.
Wow, that's so nice to hear. Because I think a lot of A lot of what you hear about parenting is, I'm tired by this, that, and the other. You know, I don't get enough sleep. I don't have time for myself. The relationship is suffering. And I'm sure that is
all those
100%
things, yeah.
true.
I literally thought of those things as I was driving to work, thinking like, I don't remember the last time I had a proper chat with Rosie, like, because when they're there, they're just screaming, dad, dad, dad. Like, but again, we've had 4 kids under 6 years old. You're going to have to go through that. Wow. And I, you know, when they're grown up and they're 12, 14, 15, I'm going to really sit with Rosie and go, I really miss them when they were little, you know, and I'm so conscious of that, which is one of the reasons, you know, we want to homeschool. I want to be with them as much as I can, because I know when they hit 11, 12, 13, their best friends and their girlfriends become the centre of their world. And so, you know, I'm hanging on as much as I can.
So you're homeschooling them as well?
Yeah, the older 2, we got a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old. So we split sort of different subjects, and I might do like the cooking and fitness and music and reading. I love reading with kids. And then, you know, Rosie might do, you know, some handwriting or some numbers and things like Numicon. We do similar stuff they do in primary school, just at home and not as structured, and it's chaos. But yeah, it works for us now. Like, I don't know if it's a long-term thing, but I love the flexibility and the freedom of not having to set an alarm and wake up and rush to school and travel a little bit in between term time and, you know, give them the education that we kind of love doing together, really.
One thing I really admire about you is that you've got a huge following, you've made a lot of money, you're very successful, but a lot of men in your position start kind of peddling absolute crap. I don't mean like products. I mean, like there's YouTube channels of people who, made a few million quid on Bitcoin, and suddenly they're telling me about, you know, what I should think politically. You know, they're really outside of their zone. I'm thinking, just because you're a trader doesn't mean you're not an expert in anything. Do you know what I mean?
There's a lot of that, yeah, especially with social media, yeah, there's a lot of that.
Have you had to sort of work hard to make sure you're focused on what you love and what you're good at and where your expertise are? Because there must be a lot of pressure on you with your audience to start talking about this, to start, you know, advertising this, that, and the other. How do you sort of stay in your lane, I guess? For
me, it's always been quite simple, right? I just focus on what I'm good at, and that really is getting people cooking, getting people moving. And so because of that, you know, if you follow me for a while, you'll see that I don't do many brand partnerships. I've done a few things, you know, again, it's the mission, right? I haven't gone off on a tangent trying to sell random stuff. And I think the reason my audience has grown and I've got such high engagement with my audience is because they know instinctively, like, I'm not just going to be selling the new, you know, energy drink next week, or, you know, the next, I don't know what it may be. Like, I think that kind of consistency in my message, really, what I'm trying to say, has been really, really powerful. So even from the start, 12 years ago, leaning 15, I'm hanging out of my living room window in Surbiton, you know, and I'm saying the same thing I'm kind of saying now, which is, you can find time, you can cook. It's only going to take 15 minutes, and that's leaning 15. Like, I'm not really saying anything differently, other than I'm talking a lot more about mental health, because I feel I've got the confidence now to actually talk about how, you know, exercise will change your mental health. It will change how you feel. And so the message has been pretty similar, pretty constant. And that's really the most important thing, because you do see someone, one minute they're a fitness influencer, the next minute they're a travel influencer, then they're, like you said, crypto, or then it's like, you know, beauty. And people change their kind of message a lot, but I'm not interested in doing that. I just want to keep doing what I'm good at and stick to that. And hopefully people, you know, will tune in and enjoy it.
Well, Joe Wicks, thank you so much for joining me. That's just been such an interesting chat with you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And yeah, it's nice to talk about addiction. I think a lot of people that do have it in their family, there's a lot of shame and stigma and embarrassment, but actually, even if you're angry right now, you can really work through it and you can rebuild relationships. You know, you can be friends with your mum or dad again. You can, you know, you can have compassion, but it takes time. Yeah, you can work through it. It's positive sides to things, you know.
There you go. That was my conversation with Joe Wicks, and what a treat it was to speak to him. And I think definitely if you only knew Joe through his sort of fitness channels, there's an awful lot going on in his past, awful lot going on in his day-to-day life that perhaps wouldn't come across, because he's so enthusiastic and so energetic about getting people moving and getting people eating correctly. So I was really grateful for the candour with which he spoke. And Joe will be joining me again on Thursday for our bonus podcast, The Gratitude List, where he'll be talking me through the 5 things he's currently grateful for. If you want to get in touch with the show and send your thoughts and reflections to hello@howdoyoukopepod.com. And you can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at howdoyoukopepod. Bye-bye. Follow How Do You Cope on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app or on Apple Podcasts. Before you go, tell us about yourself by completing a short survey at wondery.com/survey. From Wondery, this is How Do You Cope, hosted by me, John Robbins. For Audio Always, our producers are Michael Dale and Bertie Moores. Executive producers are Elsa Rochester and Dave Masterman. For Wondery, our producer is Emanuela Quenorte Francis, and our senior managing producer is Rachel Sibley. Executive producers are Michelle Martin, Chris Bourne, Morgan Jones and Marshall Louis.